Hey there friends, I hope you're doing well and getting some paint on your minis. When a new miniatures game comes out, the temptation to go all in is always knocking at my door. New and shiny things are always intriguing, especially within this hobby. It's always a blast to paint different styles of miniatures or miniatures in different scales with different aesthetics, or just to play games that are using unique rule sets that shake it up a bit from the way others have been doing it for like years and years. So when I heard the news of Star Wars Shatterpoint being released by Atomic Mass Games, I was beyond excited. As you may already know, I love to paint miniatures for Marvel Crisis Protocol. So when I get bored of painting the Warhammer miniature of the week, I grab an MCP mini and I paint it up, and I just always have a blast. It's always fun because each miniature is different from the next, making repetition nearly non-existent, which is often a problem when painting 10 to 20 miniatures for a single unit for some other games. What you may not know but can probably assume, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I grew up watching the original trilogy, and I was able to see the prequel trilogy in theaters. And yes, I'll admit, I do like the prequels. I have a good amount of Star Wars Legion miniatures in my collection, and I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to paint white clone armor in a way that doesn't look horrible. So yeah, Atomic Mass Games produces both Star Wars Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol, so I was kind of doomed from the start to spend my hard-earned schmeckles on Star Wars Shatterpoint. So on release day, I rushed over to my favorite local gaming store, the Game Chamber, to pick up the Count Dooku and Obi-Wan expansions. Sadly, I had to wait for my core set to come in the mail from a separate shop, but it arrived just 2 days later. So what's Shatterpoint all about? It's a skirmish level miniatures game that focuses on movement and objectives to emulate heroic struggles across opposing factions within the Star Wars universe. The miniatures are a slightly larger scale than found in most miniature games. They're about 40 millimeters, the same as Marvel Crisis Protocol. All the miniatures are extremely dynamic and beautiful. The game also uses measuring tools instead of measuring tapes in the same way that Star Wars Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol do, which honestly, after using them for so long now, I kind of prefer. It just feels better to me. To play the game, each player typically fields a total of 8 miniatures, which are spread across 2 squads. Each squad at the moment will contain 4 miniatures. Those 4 miniatures consist of a primary unit, which acts as the leader of the squad and determines the amount of points you can spend on the rest of the miniatures in that squad. They're generally the big named characters in the Star Wars universe, like Anakin Skywalker, Darth Maul, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you get the idea. The other miniatures in your squad must be a secondary unit and then a supporting unit. A secondary unit typically represents other named characters within the universe that aren't usually in the spotlight, but are usually closely connected to the primary characters. Characters like Gar Saxon, Jango Fett, Commander Rex, and so on. Supporting units are typically 2 miniatures, and they represent nameless backup units like clone troopers and Mandalorians and B-1 battle droids. Each of your 2 squads makes up what is called a strike team. Each squad must contain characters from the same time period in the Star Wars universe, which is denoted on their cards, but they may contain characters from opposing factions. So yes, you can have Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jango Fett in the same squad. The way the squads and strike teams are built allows for very flexible list building. The game's very plug and play, and it feels very balanced. So how does the game play? Well, combat is definitely a core feature of the game, but it's not the focus when trying to win a match. Shatterpoint is extremely mission focused. It is a game about securing dynamically shifting objectives, maintaining control, and trying to mitigate your opponent's hold across the board. Combat will help you win the game, but if it is your focus, then you will most likely lose the match, as your opponent will snag all the objectives for themselves. Every game is set up by choosing a mission. Each mission comes with a deck of 9 struggle cards, divided into 3 cards each for each of the 3 phases of the game. These cards determine where the active objectives will be that you are battling over, so they change as the game plays out. You shuffle each of the 3 sets of 3 cards and start the game by revealing the top first phase card, the first struggle of the game. Once a player wins the struggle by gaining enough points, you flip the second phase's top card, then the third after that one is resolved. The first player to win 2 struggles wins the game. If I did have one complaint about the game, it would be that there's only 1 mission included right now, but I'm sure there will be more in the future, and that 1 mission consists of 9 sets of shifting objectives. So it keeps it interesting for sure. So points are tracked via a struggle tracker, which is a board with 17 spaces, 8 on each player's side, and then a single space in the center. Each player starts with a single black cube on the farthest ends of the tracker from the center. These cubes are called momentum. Then there's a single clear cube in the center which represents the struggle of the battle flowing back and forth. As you score points from objectives at the end of your turn, you move the struggle cube towards your side of the tracker. If it ever touches a black cube on your side, you win the game. More black cubes, again momentum, get added to the board as the game goes on, making victory approach more quickly. Each player gains momentum if the cube is ever in the center of the board at the end of a turn. A player also gains momentum if they end the turn with the struggle cube still on the opponent's side of the board, which is a catch-up mechanic for runaway games. Additionally, you gain a momentum cube every time you wound an enemy character. The flow of a battle is easily visualized by the moving of the struggle cube jumping back and forth across the board, while the potential for victory ramps up quickly over the course of the game as more and more momentum is added to the board, making it more likely that the struggle will touch a momentum cube, ending the game and declaring a winner. This struggle mechanic is so satisfying and creates this sense of urgency as you and your opponent chase each other around the board trying to gain control of all the different objectives. Something that can feel really bad with other miniature games is having the models you spend hours and hours painting blown off the table within the first couple of turns, never having a chance to make an impact and look good while doing it. Shatterpoint alleviates this by implementing multiple mechanics to keep characters around. You can definitely focus on a single character and do enough damage to them to wound them. What this does is makes it so that the character cannot secure any of the objectives, which is a big deal, as whoever has the majority of characters next to an objective gains control. However, when that character's turn comes up again, you remove all damage and they get an injury token. They can then continue to play and secure objectives. Each character can only be injured so many times, however, before they are removed from the board permanently. Even when they've taken enough injuries to be removed, they are still allowed to play out one last turn before being wiped out for good. This makes combat worth the effort, while also ensuring that your opponent still has the chance to fight back, stopping runaway games from happening too often since characters will stand up and get back into the thick of battle. Wounding also gains you momentum and stops the enemy from securing objectives, which is fantastic. In regards to actually taking your turn, each character brings an order card. You shuffle all of these order cards into a deck while also including a Shatterpoint card. On your turn, you draw a card to see which model you can activate. This sounds restricting, however, when you draw a card, you can put it into reserve, which lets you place it face up off to the side. Then you can draw one more card and activate that character. You may only have one card in reserve at a time, and on your turn, you must decide if you wish to use your reserved card or draw a different character. If you draw your Shatterpoint card, you can activate any character you wish. This all adds some extra spice to your turns, adding some unknowns to the battle while also still giving you a degree of control with the Shatterpoint card and the reserve option. Each character also comes with two other cards, a unit stat card and a combat stance card. Unit stat cards contain the abilities of the character, which are all heavily thematic and determine what the character can do on their turn and sometimes on other characters' turns via reactions. Combat stance cards show how many dice each character can roll for ranged and melee attacks and defenses. When rolling an attack, after determining how many hits you land, you follow a small chart moving a number of spaces equal to your hits. These flowcharts contain spaces filled with things like damage, conditions, movement abilities, and free actions off your unit card. So every time you damage an enemy, you decide how you'll move down the chart, picking out how much damage to do, what kinds of effects you want to apply, and a lot more. Dynamically doing different kinds of attacks based on the situation you are in. Primary characters also come with double-sided combat stance cards. These can be flipped once per turn. This allows you to switch between offensive and defensive stances, stances with more movement, stances that apply more conditions. The possibilities are exceptional and require some real thought on how you want to impact the battle. The custom dice you roll when attacking or defending also not only contain strikes, critical strikes, blocks, critical blocks, and failures, but also expertise. Each expertise you roll gets added up and then you refer to a small chart at the bottom of your stance card, spending the expertise to get free hits, blocks, and other effects. This means every time you roll dice, it's unlikely that you're going to just fail. More often than not, something beneficial will occur. One last thing about the game itself is that it's very terrain heavy, and thankfully the core box supplies you with an amazing array of terrain. I was honestly surprised by the amount provided in the box. Movement is a huge part of the game, and there are many opportunities to move multiple times, shove, push or pull enemy characters, jump up onto platforms, etc. This all comes together to make cover and elevation more important. I personally love this, and I find that terrain makes games much more interesting to play and to look at. And more it seems that miniature games tend to enforce a much more sparing amount of terrain. Now, I've been talking a lot about how the game plays, but what about the miniatures? The miniatures themselves are fantastic. While I have definitely heard of some complaints regarding the assembly of some of the sculpts, I'm looking at you, B1s, and Magnagard, I didn't run into any issues that weren't solved via a dose of extra time and patience. All the sculpts are very dynamic and feature poses that are very iconic to the characters, as if they're jumping right out of the films and TV shows that we may know them from. While there may be a tactical rock or two in play, they are extremely varied and share a very consistent aesthetic design that brings everything together. The miniatures are also not littered in an array of extra details. Many modern miniatures are so detailed that the characters featured are sometimes just buried under a mountain of knickknacks. All the miniatures here are cleanly sculpted in a way that allows for an enjoyable painting experience. Just enough detail and open space, no more, no less. Now, a quick note is that all of the miniatures come with sculpted bases. They seem to display a combination of a dry, arid desert ground and some kind of stone or metal structure. They're detailed well enough, and this may be either a positive or a negative for you. Marvel Crisis Protocol does the same thing with their miniatures as well. If you like desert-based style bases, then you're in luck. If you get creative, they could even be snow bases or some other combination of natural area plus structure. But if that's not what you want, then you may need to put some work into covering up the existing sculpts. Personally, I don't mind them too much, so I just paint them up as is. So here's how my first two squads turned out, and they come together to create my first strike team. Not too bad, I think. This strike team has done me well so far in the 10 games or so that I've played. I plan to add more droids along with General Grievous to my collection, as I love the theme. Now, I've said in previous videos that I paint miniatures more than I play games, and that remains true. I plan to paint many more Shatterpoint miniatures. I had an awesome time slapping these together. However, I do like a good game, and with my schedule and the speed at which I paint miniatures, skirmish games tend to fit the bill. Shatterpoint is easily one of the best miniature games I have played. If you have even a slight interest in Star Wars and you are looking for a good skirmish level game that focuses on missions, keeping both players engaged and looking sexy while doing it, I highly suggest you give Shatterpoint a try. So thanks again for watching my video. Sorry about the delay between uploads. I've been working on renovating our guest room. So that's gonna be turned into like a studio for me to have a better painting space and place to shoot things and edit and all that stuff. So hopefully we'll have some better content in the future, or maybe at least more consistent. So yeah, thanks again for watching. Slap that like, crush the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. Positive or not, I really appreciate the feedback. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.